Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Today, we have the great honor of having the first event in the event series hosted by the Columbia China and the World Program and the China Center for Social Policy this fall semester. It's also hosted and co-sponsored by the Weatherhead East Asian Institute, which has already started their event series. My name is Qing Gao. I'm a professor of social policy and social work at Columbia University School of Social Work and also the Weatherhead East Asian Institute. Today, it's my great honor to host this lecture by Professor Suisheng Zhao, who is a professor and director of the Center for China-U.S. Cooperation at the School of International Studies, University of Denver. Professor Zhao is very well known expert on U.S.-China relations. He's a founding editor of the Journal of Contemporary China, a journal that has risen to the top of the field. He has held many important positions over the years, and he's the author and editor of more than 10 books, including this one very important new book that we will be focusing on today. The Dragon Roars Back, which focuses on the transformational leaders and dynamics of Chinese foreign policy. After Professor Zhao's talk, we will invite Professor Andy Nathan, who is a professor of political science at Columbia University, to give commentary, and also the director of the China and World Program, Professor Tom Christensen, to give some commentary. Then we will open it up to a question and answer session with both our live audience and also the online audience. I want to remind everyone this session will be recorded and posted afterwards on our YouTube channel. So welcome your input and participation throughout the session. So now I turn it over and welcome Professor Zhao.
So the book Professor Gao mentioned was to trace the trajectory and driving forces behind China's foreign policy transformation. The first question when you give a book talk, people will ask you why you wrote that book. So that should be the first question. To that question, my answers are two aspects. One is empirical, second is theoretical. Empirically, I've been teaching a class on Chinese foreign policy for many, many years. But I have found most books on Chinese foreign policy has been somehow unidimensional and static. When I said that, I meant that they are narrowly focused on China's bilateral relationships with certain countries, with certain areas, or with on certain issue areas, but have not really tried to cover the dynamics of the transformations of the PRC foreign policy over more than 70 years. So this book try to provide historically in-depth and up-to-date analysis of the foreign policy making, foreign policy transformation of the PRC since 1949. Theoretically, two theories has been used most often to understand China foreign policy behavior. Structural realism has been used most often to explain which focuses on relative power, argues that when China's relative power expands, its power ambition expands. A more powerful China would inevitably, according to that China, redefine its national interests more expansively and challenge U.S. dominance in the international system and also try to redefine its relationships with its neighbors. This theory has been used most to understand the current rising or behavior of China, but cannot explain the long range, the over 70 years of PRC history. Why? Because when PRC was founded, Chinese relative power was very constrained. But Mao Zedong had a very confrontational foreign policy. Although its power was constrained, I have a chart in my own book looking at all the China border conflicts and wars. Mao Zedong fought 6 wars during his years, including with the most powerful nation on the earth, the US, in Korea, and fought war with the Soviet Union, with India. So in that context, Mao's behavior could not be explained by the relative power. Mao also supported those insurgencies in Third World revolutionary, very confrontational, very aggressive. Deng Xiaoping shifted Mao's foreign policy, although China's relative power did not change that much at that time. And Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao followed Deng Xiaoping's moderate foreign policy, although China's relative power increased during those years. And Xi Jinping, now we all see, he has been taking a very aggressive, very confrontational foreign policy, but China's economic growth has been slowed down. China's relative power in that context has also been constrained. But I don't think Xi Jinping has slowed down or tried to slow down, and it's in his mind. So the relative power, the structural realist theory cannot help us to understand that variation of Chinese foreign policy. Another theory called regime type theory attributes to China's confrontational foreign policy to its so-called authoritarian system. In other words, only regime change can change China's foreign policy behavior. Is that the case? Of course not. China's foreign policy behavior has been moderated, has been confrontational, has been changed, shifts all over the 70 years. But China's authoritarian system has remained. So my book,
I did.
Okay, thank you.
The slides for you.
Thank you, yeah. The next slide, yeah. My book develops what I call the leadership-centered framework. It argues that leaders, yes, matter in all political systems, but matter more in Leninist, what I call Leninist authoritarian systems. We all know elected leaders are, in democracies, are constrained by oppositional leaders, term limits, public opinions. But authoritarian leaders, especially Chinese authoritarian leaders, in the Chinese system, the emphasis there is so-called hierarchy, discipline, or the Chinese term, democratic centralism. And in that system, the leaders operate relatively unconstrained by public opinions or whatever when they want to set a new direction for Chinese foreign policy. But the issue here is not every PRC leader has used that power to set new directions of Chinese foreign policy. According to the official account, there are 5 generations of Chinese leaders: Mao, Deng, Jiang, Hu, Zhao, Xi Jinping. And but they missed 3 leaders. Hua Guofeng, Zhao Ziyang, my brother. No, not brother. Not same name. And Hu Yaobang. So I put these 8 leaders together and distinguish them into 3 types of leaders. Next slide, yeah. One type in this, you can see, is so-called transformational leaders. They are game changers, of course. They they have new visions, and they have political wisdom to navigate the PRC power politics to survive, and to mobilize domestic and international resources to inspire their followers to prevail, to make their policy, their visions prevail. So who are transformational leaders? Of course, three. Mao Zedong. He has a new direction for Chinese foreign policy, what I call in my book, called revolutionary foreign policy. And in Chinese official term, he made China stand up. And Deng Xiaoping, what I called developmental foreign policy. And in the Chinese term, he made China rich. And Xi Jinping now has what I call, himself called that big power foreign policy to make China strong. The second type are so-called transformational, transactional leaders. And these leaders stayed in power, but they also stayed on course set by their predecessors. Who are transactional leaders in the PRC? Two in my book, Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao. And they survived 2 terms. And they followed the course set by Deng Xiaoping. So the transactional, they didn't, maybe they had new vision, but they never tried to set up new course. The third type, what I call failed leaders. They might have new visions, but who cares? They lost power. Who are these failed leaders in the PRC leadership? Of course, Hua Guofeng, my brother, and Zhao Ziyang. So in my class, I always joke that students really thought, your brother? And Hu Yaobang. And but my book focus on these 3 transactional transformational leaders, Deng Xiaoping, Mao Zedong, and Xi Jinping. They each, this is the framework in my book. This each have new visions there, and also they stay in power. Not only stay power, they prevailed in a navigated very strongly in a power struggle, either through personal charismatic leadership or office power. And then they each tried to use domestic resources and international resources. Domestic resources, I look at 2 aspects. One is so-called ideational. They create, construct ideation environment. Here, I look at 2 aspects, historical memories and nationalist aspirations. And the other domestic aspect I look at is institutional, how each leader restructured institutional apparatus to advance their foreign policy agenda. International aspect, I look at these 3 leaders. They each exploit international environment. I look at 2 aspects. One is the power distribution, that's where RAR type. And the other is norms, rules, regimes, and institutions, international order here. But today's talk, I will not talk the book itself, because you can read. If I if I talk the book, you will not read it. So I will focus today on the Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping's power concentration and its foreign policy implications. So before I talk that, I want to give you a little idea about foreign policy making hierarchy in China. I look at 3 levels. I mean, at top is paramount leaders. Now Xi Jinping at that top, Mao Zedong, Deng Xiaoping, all were in that position. But below them, there are 3 levels of foreign policy making. One is a foreign policy making institutions. These are so-called central committee, which does not meet that often. So Politburo Standing Committee meet more frequently, and make decisions on behalf of the Central Committee. The next level are especially on foreign policy making arena, what they themselves call the policy coordination and consultation institution, 协调议事机构 in Chinese, they call that. These are opaque party organizations work behind the scenes to assist those top leaders, paramount leaders on pressing issues in what I call interdepartmental, not what I call it, they call interdepartmental matter. The third tier is, you can see at the top, line bureaucracies in the party, government, and military. Their roles, they are not decision-making institutions. Their roles are information gathering, policy implementation, and recommendation to the top leaders. That are their functions. Bureaucracy. Each, thank you. You know my, yes, good, thank you. Each transformational leader has different leadership style to work with this hierarchy. And as a founder of the PRC, Mao Zedong was a charismatic leader, what I call a crusader, basically making strategic and security decisions top down. And he delegated, he did not like bureaucracy, he hated bureaucracy. So he delegated his lieutenant, trusted Zhou Enlai, premier, to deal with bureaucracy. And he just, in fact, he also created some other mechanism to coordinate with bureaucracy. Deng Xiaoping, what I call strong, pragmatic strong man. And he never held top party and government position. The highest was the military, the chairman, but the vice premier was highest position in the government. But he put his proteges, Hu Yaobang, Zhao Ziyang, on the front. But his style is very unique. Deng Xiaoping delegates routine decisions to bureaucrats. I mean, my former advisor, Suisheng, had a term I really like it, delegation by consensus. He was consensus builder, but he delegated the authorities, powers to those bureaucrats, led them to reach consensus. Then he ratified that. And he stepped in only if they could not reach consensus. That's how his consensus building process. And in fact, Hu Yaobang, his Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao followed his style, but added one thing: collective leadership. Deng Xiaoping started talking about collective leadership, but he never really practiced that. But Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao followed that, and also tried to make decisions through a consensus or collective leadership process. Xi Jinping changed everything. He arguably, I would say, is the most powerful leader in the PRC history, because especially after the 20th Party's Congress, he eliminated all potential rivals, factional rivals, and placed his own people in all the key positions. And so Xi Jinping is running the country, I would think, without credible rivals at this time. I really cannot identify any. Now the fighting is among his own people. We all know that. And so this has upset a long-standing practice in the PRC top echelon politics, because they were always balanced. Mao Zedong was balanced by Liu Shaoqi, Deng Xiaoping, those old comrades. Deng Xiaoping was balanced by Chen Yun and some elders. And Jiang Zemin was balanced by Deng Xiaoping. Hu Jintao was balanced by Jiang Zemin. Who is balancing Xi Jinping? I really don't see anyone now could balance Xi Jinping. So the decision-making style or process has been completely shifted from a consensus building model to Xi in command model. I still remember I went to graduate school. My former advisor, Suisheng, Mao in command, all those kind of Mao in command model. Now we come back to Xi in command model. And in fact, Xi is such a, micromanager, chairman of everything. Everything, if he cares, you have to let him know. I don't know how can he sleep nowadays. How many hours he has? He must have more than 24 hours a day. That what we have. So he personally, whatever he cares, even toilet, the public toilet, where should have it. You have to let him know. He make decisions on those issues. That's him today. Is it Xi in command? It's a management style. But here, how Xi has reached to this point of power, and what are the foreign policy implications of Xi Jinping's power concentration. 3 triggers in my book talked about how Xi consolidated power after became the party general secretary. One was the elites complained that Hu Jintao leadership was too weak and factional. And Nathan, Professor Nathan's expert on the factional politics here. In fact, factional makeup of a collective leadership was too divisive to curb so-called massive corruption. And also the liberal ideas came in during those years, threatening the CCP's one-party role. The second was a series of high-profile scandals. We all know that Bo Xilai, Lin Jihua, Zhou Yongkang, whoever, those people really, at that time, people understood that. Third was the Chinese elites, rising nationalist aspiration after China successfully held and hosted the Olympic and also the financial crisis in 2009, 2010. And the Chinese people also at that elite, you can talk to them, they were very frustrated because they thought the Western countries, many other Western powers did not want to see China rise. So they confident, but frustration. So in response, Xi Jinping made 3 moves. Next. He presented himself as a strong, visionary, and purposeful leader in coping with those what he saw unprecedented challenges and threats. He's talking about how the Soviet Union collapsed, everything, talking about China could face those kind of problems. So in that case, he basically got consent of the elites, political elites. We got someone different from Hu Jintao and different from Jiang Zemin. And so that's one aspect. Another aspect, those scandals really helped him. He launched this kind of anti-corruption campaign, eliminated his potential rivals. Then in response to the national confidence and also frustration, he proposed so-called China dream of the great rejuvenation, 伟大复兴, and envisioned that China time arrived, finally. And to reclaim its lost power. I'm the person to bring China back to the center of the international stage. That's what that really resonated. The renewed nationalism, confidence, and self-assertion at that time. Now we look back, that's so joke. But at that time, really, he really did that successfully. And then next, Xi Jinping's power concentration has been institutionalized at all 3 levels of foreign policy hierarchy. At the top level, this is the chart how his power concentration institutionally built up. The 3 levels, you can see the policy-making level and the coordination level and bureaucracy. Let me go into the 3 very quickly, briefly. At the foreign policy making institutions, he is very it showed his political wisdom to build personal loyalty, personal authority in the top decision-making institutions as the norm, really as the norm there. And these all, I don't want to repeat this. I mean, you can see this yourself, all those constitutional restructuring, term limit, and everything, personal cult, and how he tried to get all those subordinates to show their personal loyalty to him. Let me focus. Mao move on. Yeah, Mao talked about the next two levels. One is coordination level, the foreign policy, mostly on the foreign policy, and also bureaucracy level. For the coordination level, for many years after 1981, you can see from this 中央外事工作领导小组 Central Foreign Affairs Leadership Small Group was the only standing foreign policy coordination institution. When I said 1981, is there some kind of misleading because Mao Zedong started that in 1958. He created 7 leadership small groups. One of them is foreign affairs, but they were disbanded by during Cultural Revolution, 1970. So 1981, they were restored. So that's how I said 1981, they restarted. But they were kind of proliferation of the bureaucracy to be coordinated. So in 2000, after the NATO bombing of the Chinese embassy in Belgrade in 1999, Jiang Zemin created national security leadership small group from 2000, and Hu Jintao created another one in 2010 after South China Sea, East China Sea. Those kind of maritime disputes became so difficult to coordinate. 九龙戏水, 9 institutions to involved in those. So he created another national security type of called the Protecting Maritime Rights and Interests Leadership Small Group. And the problem here is that all these small groups, they did not have regular staff members. It's kind of ad hoc meetings. So they all have to work with or use the staff support from 中央外办, the Central Foreign Affairs Office, which is also a party and government, one institution, 2 labels. And so they cannot conduct a regular foreign policy analysis, all policy and recommendations. They serve mostly as the emergency, crisis management institution in the interdepartmental level. Xi Jinping came to office, quickly realized this was the issue. And many people, in fact, before that, if from all those people, you must have heard so much people said China should have set up like America and National Security Council, all those things. Xi Jinping came to office, quickly got those points. So he tried to build stronger coordination institutions. The first thing he did was the so-called state or security commission. I don't know how to translate that correctly. 国家安全委员会 is state or national or whatever. I just use this.
I'll ask you
Okay, Tom, you, yeah. So that absorbed the national security leadership's small group. But it's much higher level as not only a coordination. You can see that charter. I mean, not charter, don't have charter. The news. It was not only a coordination institution, but also decision-making institution because Xi Jinping himself got involved very much. But at this time, Xi Jinping's understanding of national security has changed because it's not only external security threats, but also the internal security threat in connection with external security threats. So that's a new security concept developed. In that context, this institution, National Security Commission, shifted its focus from external security to internal security in connection with external security. That's how this institution has developed. And Xi Jinping certainly approve that, not only approve that, understand that well, then he upgraded in 2018 the Foreign Affairs small group into Foreign Affairs Commission. So what's the difference between commission and a small group? In essence, maybe not that much, but in bureaucratic term, it's different. It's more formal, more bureaucratic. Yeah, and also staff support. Yeah, so commission. Now he upgrade that, and not only those confusion, coordination. He has convened high-level foreign affairs work conferences much more often than his predecessors to bring those senior leaders and other players in line with his foreign policy agenda. For example, foreign affairs central work conference, Mao Zedong, Jiang Zemin, and Hu Jintao each had one they call first, second, third. Then he started fourth, and then he started fifth. He had much more those kind of meetings. Then, in fact, he conducted 3. And then he also changed those kind of foreign envoy meetings. Those are 5 years each in the past. He changed them into annual conference. So call them back. Listen to what I tell you to do. He attended quite a few of them, give instructions, tell them. So that's how the centralized coordination process and policy implementation, level. Xi Jinping has politicized and enlarged foreign policy bureaucracies. When I say politicize here, what I mean is that before Xi Jinping, during Deng Xiaoping's years, Chinese diplomats, just like all other diplomats in other countries, saw themselves as professionals. But there's an ironical or paradoxical development because of the change to the professionals. Because more they become professionalized, less politically important they were. That was the situation. And post foreign minister position of those foreign ministers declined from the rank of Politburo member to vice premier to the state councilor. You can see those kind of, and also there were studies about the morale of the foreign affairs ministry declined. The perks, they even cannot compare with the now we call Ministry of Commerce at that time, foreign economic. Those had much more benefits than the foreign ministry diplomats, Chinese. That they have to serve too many bosses, top, hierarchically, and public. They were exhausted. They thought Xi Jinping came, changed this whole thing. They basically reverse the decline of the political status and give them more authorities, more resources. I talked to Chinese embassy people, I talked to the foreign ministry people. They felt Xi Jinping came, give them more resources, give them more respect, give them more kind of authority. In the embassy, for example, Chinese embassy, all the ministries, they came to the embassy, the ambassador, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in charge, financially, everything they are in charge now. They start thinking Xi Jinping years, change their status. But the cost is you have to change from a professional to what? To fighter, warrior. Political loyalty instead of professional standard is the most important factor for your promotion, for your survival in the foreign ministry, for sure. And Xi Jinping has also enlarged the reach of the foreign policy bureaucracy, especially those CCP, central departments, propaganda department, international department, United Front department. They have been pushed to the forefront. Before Xi Jinping was behind the scene mostly. They they give them more also resources, but they distinguish their function from the foreign ministry or government state. They focus more long-term oriented, more flexible issues to correct foreign elites misperceptions of China, not on the daily operation of foreign affairs. And also military diplomacy has been also promoted, not only promoted, tightened. Before Xi Jinping's time, Hu Jintao, Jiang Zemin almost lost control of the military. So he centralized with a chairman responsibility system in the military and also foreign affairs. For example, give one example. The foreign affairs office of the defense ministry was upgraded, moved out of defense ministry into CMC, Central Military Commission, as a CMC Office of International Military Cooperation. I met some of those people. So they are under direct authority of Xi Jinping himself. Let's move quickly to the foreign policy implications of all those institutional change. There are so many. Let me just mention three aspects briefly. First, so obvious, Xi Jinping's politicization of foreign policy making has changed the incentive structure of Chinese diplomats from being professionals, as we said, into political loyalists. Before Xi Jinping time, Chinese diplomats just like normal people, making friends, turn enemies into friends. This type of normal diplomats, they are no longer normal now. If you if you talk to them, and some of you, if they're friends, like Tom's friends, are still normal people. And but they definitely not try to prove that professionals. What I approve is the loyal to the Communist Party and loyal to Xi Jinping, to become warriors, to win diplomatic battles. And Xi Jinping called to demonstrate your fighting spirit, 斗争精神, baseline thinking, 底线思维, even 极限思维, those type of pursuing core national interests. What's called national interests? Defined as bottom line of national survival, cannot be negotiated, cannot be compromised. I joke with my friends in the diplomats. If nothing is can compromise, nothing can be negotiated. Why we need diplomats? Ministry of Defense should be sufficient. You can fight to win everything, if you can win. Diplomacy is the art of compromise. We all know that. So that's the change, so clear. I mean, for those who work with the Chinese diplomats, you can see Wang Yi, for example. When he was in Japan, I went to Japan talking to friends in Japan. They said, oh, he was really professional. Courtesy, polite. Now he's a total different person. Total different person. Even Yang Jiechi, Tiger Young for Americans, Bush family. Then he changed in Alaska. I mean, it's a totally different person because the incentive structure has changed, and the enlarge of bureaucratic reach of Chinese foreign policy institutions also changed Chinese foreign policy behavior, make China more aggressive. For example, international United Front. I mean, Chinese Communist Party agencies, United Front, Propaganda Department, and the Intelligence Department become much more not only proactive but threatening. I mean, why American government became so alert to the Chinese Communist Party influence operation in the U.S. because those are those issues. They are in charge of them. They have been active. And also military diplomacy. We can see Xi Jinping in charge and called those Chinese military leaders to be ready to fight, then to use diplomatic, what they call the coercive diplomacy coercive diplomacy, basically use the military to support diplomacy. Here we see a lot of changes. China, for example, China's policy toward Taiwan, especially China's military collaboration with Russia. Since Xi Jinping has been really, really impressive, changed a lot. Second, Xi's power concentration at top guarantees making mistakes, making wrong policy decisions. In fact, if you look at these last 10 years, what has Xi Jinping accomplished? The only thing he accomplished is to centralize his power. Other than that, what has accomplished? Really not, especially in the foreign policy front. My former advisor, Suisheng, she has a book called Overreach. That's a term I will use. Overextension, overplay his hands, especially in the relationship with the US. With unchecked power, Xi Jinping's big power diplomacy has really become overreached, making so many enemies, united enemies, and alienate those possible partners. Really made China foreign policy a mess. He's raising anti-foreign nationalist sentiments. He's a one Belt, one road, and anti-hegemonic coalition with Russia and Iran. Everything. He's using economic coercion against Australia and Japan, Philippines, and other neighbors. Everything made China really overreached. What's the consequence of the overreach? Pushback by the US, by China's neighbors, by other countries. And so China's, from Xi Jinping, I don't think you want to be Xi Jinping at this time, because you see enemies everywhere. He saw those pushback as a threat to his regime security and the national security. So he elevated security to the status previously reserved only for development. I mean, in the past, when you study Chinese foreign policy, in the past, there was a conflict between development and security. Most often, Deng Xiaoping's time, they try to emphasize development. Foreign policy is to serve economic development. Just now, just reversed, using economic strength to serve China's security objective. Therefore, if there's a conflict between security and development, he will sacrifice development for so-called regime and national security. So China's international environment becomes so severe. Xi Jinping and the 20th Party Congress and last year or so emphasized 风高浪急, high wave, high tide, high threat, everything, storms, dangerous storms. But in the meantime, you can see he emphasized security has increased his tolerance for escalation and economic pushback. And that's why you see, we saw Xi Jinping is so stupid. Now when you have those kind of security laws in China, anti-espionage law, all those would stop all the foreign investments. It hurts yourself. But he did that from this perspective, on this kind of logic. And so that was the Secretary of Commerce, her visit to China last month, that China's almost an uninvestable place. Foreigners would not invest in China. And Chinese foreign corporations have moved out their operations out of China and production and set up supply chain to other places. That will really make China's economic slowdown expedited. Really bad for him, but that is the situation. And China becomes more isolated and more stagnated. That's the situation in China. That's why people say China now is falling into mid-income trap or whatever. economic growth is peaked. Whatever those arguments has related to Xi Jinping himself, those kind of policies. And in that context, Xi's big power foreign policy has suffered a setback. Not only in terms of China may not ever catch the US, surpass the United States, but also his own personal head of state diplomacy. He did not travel anywhere this year in the first half year, only 2 days in Russia. He went to Brazil and South Africa, but he did not even deliver his speech. Now he missed a G20. Why? One of the very important causes because at home, too many issues, too many problems, political scandal. I mean, now we all know Minister of Defense. We don't know what's going on with him. We knew now Qinggang disappeared, and many other issues there, and economic growth slowed down, and so many issues he has had to pay attention other than his own health, because I don't think he sleep well. So many issues for him. Third, last one. Although Xi Jinping has concentrated policy-making power, he does not have Mao Zedong's charismatic authority power. So why people listen to him? Not because he accomplished everything, because his punishment, his power itself, fear of his power itself. So nobody will dare to tell him he's making mistakes or what's ever going wrong with his policy. He used a kind of arbitrarily commenting against the center. Now more personal, you against me, you cannot escape if you disagree with me. So Xi's personalistic power concentration has created what I call dictator immobilism. The entire system will not work without his personal involvement. If he does not care about that, nobody even can make a decision on those issues. Only if he cares, you see a decision making there. But very often, that decision is his personal will, and very often is a wrong decision. In that case, people ask, when you talk about foreign policy, my students all ask, will he take action against Taiwan by force? I say, I don't know. Only he knows. But if he made that decision, nobody can stop him. Just not, he is not prudent today. So his power concentration has plugged China into a what kind of versus cycle. She as a strong leader and will make wrong decisions, and continue to make wrong decisions. And but if he make wrong decisions, nobody can stop him. Then the consequence will be severe. He became more defensive, Jack Mao Zedong in 1950s. And so China foreign policy has become incoherent, irrational, and unpredictable from now on. In conclusion, let me summarize that she has successfully consolidated power and centralized foreign policy back institutions, but he has done that at expense of overreach and many mistakes. So China's future become increasingly uncertain. So those are my conclusions here. Thank you.